Hello Giants fans, welcome to Giants Baseball 101. I'm Gabe Vaughn, your host. Thank you everybody for joining me today. I do have an announcement for tonight. I've started writing articles in the fan posts for McCoveyChronicles.com. McCovey Chronicles is the Giants branch of the SB Nation network. So please make sure to visit the website and check out my fan posts. Once again, that's McCoveyChronicles.com. And you go to fan posts and look at the articles. My username, by the way, is Gabe Vaughn, Giants Baseball 101. No spaces. They're pretty easy to find. So please check out my articles, and then I would love to see some of your comments show up there. I will alert you though. My next article is likely to be just, just the basic commentary of this video in writing. So don't feel that you need to read that if you find it's about exactly the same thing I talked about tonight and then I'm just saying the same thing. Don't feel that you need to read that one, because my next one's likely to be just the basic content of this video in writing. So please check it out, McCoveyChronicles.com, fan posts under Gabe Vaughn, Giants Baseball 101. You can read some of my articles. I'd love to see comments show up. Anyway, for tonight, it is interesting, although not too surprising to me, to find out that the Giants, in fact, did make some kind of an attempt to get Carlos Correa, and that they have not completely given up on him. His deal with the Mets is still, as of right now, not finalized. Before we go on, I want to make it clear. I am not accusing the Giants of not doing the right thing or saying it's just when you don't know all of the facts and details of a matter, it's just not good to try to say definitely that somebody's doing the right thing or not doing it. So I'm not going to try to do that here. What I'm telling you tonight is basically speculation. So the Giants supposedly are making some kind of an attempt, staying in contact with Scott Boras. They are trying to take advantage of this opportunity that the Mets are kind of giving them with Correa not confirmed, and that they would want to get him back if they could. But I doubt, there are just things that make me doubt the reality of a sincerely good attempt to get Correa. I doubt the reality of the fact that they're making any try at recovering Correa, any attempt that's actually worth anything. To start off, we'll remember the Giants previously went after two other real good star players. At the trade deadline, it was Juan Soto. This offseason, it was Aaron Judge. Now, I understand with the Juan Soto thing that story would be tainted, obviously, by the Giants' 7-game slide, their 7-game losing streak, where everything went awry. That obviously tainted the process. And I'm not 100% sure how the story goes, whether they were supposed to have made an attempt still to get Soto on trade deadline day. But however it was, it's clear they didn't aggressively pursue Soto in a way that was going to succeed or anything. Then the thing with Judge too. And officially the Giants, what we hear is that the Giants made a sincere attempt to get Judge. And they came to within one step of signing him. But get this, Judge went for $360 million. That shouldn't have happened. Judge shouldn't have gone for $360 million. This was a time when the Giants were planning to contend for 2023. It really was. Judge went to the Yankees for $360 million. That sounds like a lot. It's a lot for some. It's not a lot for Judge in the Giants' current circumstance. Doesn't the recent history of the attempt to get these two superstar players, doesn't the recent history make you at least doubt the reality of a worthwhile attempt to recover Correa. And remember what I said about the Mets. They had a great offseason. They were very successful. They've got a big budget. They're going to be a great team in 2023 no matter what. They had a great offseason. And they can afford to avoid this risk with Correa. Although I do think this whole injury thing is weird. It has something to do with his ankle, some kind of surgery that he had back in 2014. That was 9 years ago now, and to me, that's just weird. 2014, it's showing up right now. It really, I'll say whatever effect of this injury that is giving him trouble with his physical, I'll say that it picked a really bad time to show up now, so whatever it is, that is weird. But the Mets, as we know, have had a really good offseason. They are not going to rush things with Correa. It is taking them forever to confirm his deal. They're not going to rush things. They're just not going to do it. Huge contract that he came to terms with them on. Now they're doing his physical. But the important thing to understand is that the Mets are not going to rush things with Correa. They had a great offseason. They're not in a position of having to really be desperate like we see that the Giants are. Now, if you were Scott Boras, what would you be doing during this time? Just think about it. Put yourself in Scott Boras' shoes. Imagine yourself just the way he is, with his personality as an agent, advisor, businessman, and everything. If you were Scott Boras and you had a realistic way to get a good offer close to what his projected contract value was going to be, would you wait on the Mets for this? Would you wait on the Mets during this time in this situation, knowing that every morning that you wake up, you're a day closer to the start of the season? In January, it's the new year now, in January of 2023, if you were Scott Boras, would you be waiting on the Mets if you had another realistic opportunity to get a contract that would be, well, like close to his projected value? And does it sound like a thing Scott Boras would do? Would he have the patience to do that? If the Giants, the other main team who was going after Correa, were offering him a contract anywhere near what their first offer was, why would Scott Boras be waiting on the Mets? Why would this be so much of an issue? And it is clear. Correa and Boras are focusing on other teams right now, which that kind of indicates the Mets are not the only ones. Some other teams are in the mix, but the main one they're considering is the Mets. If the Giants are making an attempt to get him back, now you could say the reason is, well, Scott Boras doesn't trust the Giants anymore because they didn't keep it the first time. But you'll remember, it was a very narrow window of time. It wasn't anything like the way things are with the Mets. According to my understanding, it wasn't a very long process of basically doubt about how the physical was going to turn out. And the Mets started negotiating with Correa, I believe, pretty quickly. So I think Scott Boras sensed the opportunity to go to the Mets. Now it's taken a lot longer. The Mets are taking like forever. We're in January of 2023, and every new day that rolls around is one day closer to the start of spring training, and of course, a day closer to the start of the 2023 season. If the Giants were a realistic option to get Correa that big contract that he wants, would Scott Boras be waiting on the Mets? And it's clear, I think, if the Giants offered Correa something again, would they be likely to cast doubt on his physical again? I don't think that's the way that they're going to work. I think they would realize, if they realized they needed to offer Correa something big to get him, I'm certain they would realize they need to kind of wrap this thing up and sign Correa. So it does cast doubt. It's clear to me, at least I really don't think the Giants are offering Correa anywhere near the $350 million over 13 years that they had offered him before. I just don't think that's happening. Now, what they're looking to offer him, if they were to find a way to get him on his team, what they're expecting to be paying him, I have no idea. But to me, it just doesn't seem like it's something that has any kind of real power to it, any kind of real ability to actually get Correa and Scott Boras going the Giants' way. Otherwise, wouldn't they be doing it by now if the Giants were offering him something realistic? If the Giants were making a real financial attempt to get Correa, wouldn't they be closer to be succeeding? Why would it be listed as unlikely? Why would that be Farhan Zaidi's message that it's unlikely they're getting Correa? That's why I have to cast doubt here. And look at the other side of things. If it's true that the Mets are Correa's only realistic option to land a long-term deal that's over $300 million, if they're his best shot at that, if they're his high ceiling team, and by high ceiling I mean high in contract value, for this long period of time contract, if the Mets are Correa's best bet, then it is perfectly consistent with Scott Boras' personality to stick with the Mets and take the chances on them. So if the Mets are not the only team, if the Giants are giving Correa a realistic opportunity to make a lot of money, and I mean by his standards, then you would think Scott Boras would, in short, long story short, you would think the Giants would have a very realistic chance of getting Correa on their team, and they'd be looking good for them. But on the other hand, if the Mets are kind of the only team that's offering this big of a contract, if it's clear the Mets are the place where Correa would get the highest contract value, and that if it happened, it would just take time, it's perfectly consistent with Scott Boras' approach to baseball business to stick with the Mets and wait on them. I mean, think about it. Just think about it a bit. Boras is the guy who, even in an amateur draft setting, will advise a drafted player who is not getting the signing bonus offer that he feels is right for him. Boras is the guy who will advise that player not to sign, to risk the loss of an opportunity, even to wait another year. I think according to my understanding, he'd advise players to go to college, whether it's going to college or just spending another year in college baseball. Scott Boras is the guy to do that. He's looking at the highest ceiling contract a player can get. And if he'll do that at the amateur level, what about now at the professional level, where a guy's looking at a big deal over a long period of time, and it's a guy who all along had a projected value that was a lot, and that Boras has the confidence, at least he's sure enough of his success at getting teams to believe him, which I believe is the truth, when he says that Correa's not injured and that this is not a problem, and I believe that's the truth. And finding out that this was a thing that happened back in 2014, it convinces me even more of the truth of the statement. So it's just like Scott Boras. If the Mets are Correa's highest dollar value chance, it's just like him to wait on them. And apparently that's what's going on. So what does this mean for the Giants? Wouldn't it be consistent with their history to say that the Giants are just not deliberate enough about anything? Missing out on Aaron Judge. When you see Judge go for $360 million, the thing you realize is just that the Giants are just not deliberate enough about getting Aaron Judge when they need him. When they try to do things, you're like, trying doesn't fix things. They need to succeed on a few more stuff. And again, I don't know the details. I don't know exactly. I don't know the facts, what's going on with the Giants right here. But my best guess is that whatever attempts they're making right now to get Correa on the team is a very feeble one. If it's unlikely to work, you'll remember that they offered him $350 million over 13 years. And while the Mets are not going to rush things, as I said before, and they do not need to rush them, the Giants are a different story. You just think about, in a baseball game, stealing bases. That's a risk, and getting caught does more harm than the good. A stolen base does typically. I believe the statistical thinking on that, though, is in a late game, if you're behind, probably going to lose anyway if you don't get something on the board. The threshold for success on stolen bases is lowered a bit, so you can afford to be a bit riskier. What about, that's just a silly little in-game example, what about outside the game with a player like Carlos Correa? The Giants, if it's not looking good for them in 2023, just on the whole scheme of things, the way things stand, taking a risk on Correa, and this, remember the year number, 2014 was his surgery. He's had success since then. Why it's showing up in the physical right now, I don't know all the facts. The risk for a team that's kind of down in the dumps this offseason, like the Giants, it's kind of something they got to take. And you may say, well, this is a 12 or 13 year deal. It's a long period of time. They're paying him a lot of money for a long period of time. We got to look farther than 2023. Yes, that is true, but again, just this is going to be a circulating theme. 2014 was the year of the surgery, and Scott Boras says the injury is not a real problem, and Correa had a great year in 2022. It would be a tragedy indeed if the rest of his career was ruined by this injury. The risk the Giants would be taking in 2023 is something they got to take anyway. The risk for the future, well, it would just be a huge tragedy if this injury ruined the rest of Correa's career. And I think you can tell I'm saying that I don't believe it's likely to. That's the way things stand, and the theme is, I believe, that the Giants just aren't deliberate enough about getting Correa, and this attempt to get him, the reason it's unlikely is because they're not putting enough into it. Thank you for watching. This has been Giants Baseball 101. Please subscribe if you haven't. Thank you so much, everybody who has subscribed. Don't forget to check me out on McCovey Chronicles in the fan posts. And I'll see you next time on Giants Baseball 101.